Movie Time is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.com.
The award-winning It's Movie Time is produced by John DeSando. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando.
And I'm Linda Baas McClelland.
And this is...
It's movie time.
All right, Linda.
Yes, John.
The film is called American Sniper.
Woohoo.
And always, as we get close to Oscar time, Clint Eastwood sneaks a movie in that we have to look at and say to ourselves, is this going to be an Oscar contender?
Yeah, he's throwing it in like a grenade.
Yes. American Sniper is about Chris Kyle, who is the American sniper who has the most kills in the history of military action, 160 plus, to be sure.
Right. And his fellow SEALs call him the Legend.
Oh, right. They actually, when they talk to him, they say, "Hey, Legend."
Mm-hmm.
So he is that indeed.
Right.
Linda, it's inescapable that you have military in your background.
Yes.
And you have Iraq in your background.
Yes.
And we're talking mainly about Iraq and talking about a sniper who is a SEAL who has 4 tours in Iraq.
We'll get back to my personal connection,
Right.
but Bradley Cooper is just so outstanding in this movie. It's hard to believe that he's the same guy that was in the goofy Hangover movie.
Hangover.
Yeah, they were Hangover movies.
And really quite different in American Hustle.
He was wonderful in that, and he was very good in Silver Linings Playbook.
Right.
Too. But he is on it now. Time magazine says that he got the adaptation of the book that had been on the bestseller list for 30 weeks. That was written by Chris Kyle, the real Chris Kyle. This is a true story.
Right.
And then he had gone to spend a lot of time with Chris and his family. So he really got to know the real man very, very well, and consequently put on 40 pounds, bulked up to look more like him.
Yep.
Got into this Texas cowboy twang that he did not even stop using when the director yelled cut. He just kept at it for 3 months of shooting.
Yeah.
But I thought he was unbelievably
Yeah,
good.
you're using an awful lot of method acting here. He certainly should be considered for an Oscar nomination for this, but I'll tell you, I think it doesn't have enough range. That the person you talked about, who's really a smart, good old boy, has a kind of plateau whereby he is, from beginning to end, always acting the same, with the same accent,
Right.
and with the same kind of vacant look of a guy who's been through so much
Right.
he barely is able to tell you. So, so that's where I'm at. And, this was originally going to be directed by Steven Spielberg.
Correct.
But
It's hard to imagine that.
yeah, it's hard to, because this is right along.
Clint Eastwood is
Right.
so good. I thought he was great.
Yeah, and Eastwood as a director is in love with guns.
Yes.
And he's very comfortable with that. I can't help but think that this film, American Sniper, doesn't compare well with another one where you have an assassin type, and this is Unforgiven. This is the Western that came out in the 90s, which won the Oscar for Eastwood. And it's where you have a man who has to continue to come back to his profession, and I'm just not sure that this cuts it. For me, there is way too much of the domestic, and that's, of course, the heart of the conflict here. It's not
going back and forth, and he becomes more dehumanized by the violence and the decisions he has to make, and then he comes back into his family life, and noises like a lawnmower will unhinge him.
Yeah. But this is nothing new, Linda. I mean,
no,
I've
it's
seen
not.
this
No.
before.
And in one point, the wife says, even when you're here, you're not here. That is not a profound statement. I mean, because every wife of every man deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, I'm sure, felt the same way.
Yeah, so in other words, what may be a cliche is actually true.
Yes. Oh, it is. It's very true. Yeah. Very, very true.
And do we get to know here his motivation, Linda?
For doing this?
Yes.
Well, he started out as a cowboy, and I think it was 9/11. he's watched 9/11 on TV, and I think that's what caused him to enlist and to train to be a Navy SEAL, which that was an interesting part of the movie to see how brutal the training for Navy SEALs are.
Yeah.
But he also has a gift at sharpshooting, which he'd had since a child.
Yeah.
And the movie opens with him on top of a building. And what he does up there with his gun, he is protecting the Marines as they go into buildings to flush out insurgents. This woman comes out, an Iraqi woman in her robes with her little boy, and he's watching her and watching her, and he has to assess the situation before he can act. Well, it turns out that she takes out from under her robe a grenade and hands it to her little boy, and in that instant, he's got to decide what to do. I've got to protect my Marines.
And it's not the first incident like that we'll have. A little bit later on, he's got another young boy that he has his sights on.
Right.
And in some of these cases, he doesn't have anybody else but himself to make the decision. Now, ordinarily, he can speak remotely to someone who's observing, who can say, yes, that is a woman carrying a grenade, da-da-da. We concur, go ahead. In some cases where they can't, the observers can't see, he's left by himself. And that's, to me, the real anguishing part of this, is deciding if the person that you're shooting is, in fact, the enemy. Because, as you well know, in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can't be sure.
Right. The bad guys, they all look like bad guys. And even when they're friendly to the Americans, they usually have another purpose that they've got behind their friendly actions. And that's why none of these people can be trusted. And it makes it very hard for the soldiers to decide. It's not like, in the Second World War, where the soldiers were recognized by their uniforms.
Right.
Everybody's got on a robe, and in some cases they've got on American trainers and a sweatshirt, and, you've got to watch everybody.
And this was, started way back in the Civil War and probably before that, where you had people wearing the enemy's, where you had uniforms improperly worn by people, saboteurs of the type. So we're used to it, but not to the extent that you have in Iraq, where you have families, fathers, children, who could be possible collaborators.
Exactly.
And your decision making constant. So I know that you've shared a little bit of this with your son, who's done quite a bit.
We talked a lot about it on Sunday.
Any insights from that? I know you can't
nothing
reveal.
new from this movie. I mean, because it spelled it out pretty well.
Yeah.
But, the bad guys are brutally evil, not to be trusted. And there was a character in this movie called the Butcher who had ingenious ways of using a power drill.
Yes.
I won't go into it any further. But these are devious, evil people. And I think that's the way Chris Kyle, the author of this book, and the main character,
assassin,
and that's how he felt about it. But he had to go from second to second to second to assess: is this a bad guy? Is that a good guy? Is that an innocent person? Is this person out to kill my Marines? And it does dehumanize him.
There's one point at which he says he's there to protect the soldiers and protect our soldiers. And I thought that was a really good rationale for his role.
Right.
Yet at the same time, he has people at home, a family at home, for whom he should feel just as protected, and he does.
Right.
He shifts and says, I am protecting you, I'm protecting my family.
Right.
But the question as to why you would do, for instance, 4 tours?
He became obsessed with it. He really did. And I think the Time magazine article quotes a part in his book said this was the time of my life or something. He got high on doing this. But he also was smart enough to realize that I've got to come back to my real life. And I think that occurs during that sandstorm that was so dreadful. And this, my son was talking about these sandstorms. You can't see, you can't breathe. And this sandstorm kind of came over him like a cloud. And I think that instant, he realized, okay, I'm done with this. I need to go home.
It's a convenient metaphor for the fog of war.
Yes,
Almost
exactly.
anybody who sees it would. But I think that's fine. That works. You can't see through the sand. You can't see while you're doing it. They're also in this movie, I have to give Eastwood credit, and Kyle, because there are some fellow soldiers, one or two anyway, who question why they're there.
Exactly, yeah.
And wouldn't this be, for any intelligent, educated person, wouldn't this be a thought to have?
Right.
Particularly because of WMDs, the way we got into the war.
Yeah.
So you imagine a sniper, and there's nothing more personal than what he does with his target.
Right.
And
takes them out.
Yeah, it takes them out. And to question after a while, especially when you're going to talk about a mother and a child,
Oh.
you know, yes, you know, what,
Yeah.
why am I here, or why are we here?
Exactly. And I think that's why the people should go see the movie, because, not to get political, but here we are again. We're on the brink of becoming very involved in the Middle East again.
Yes.
And then it's like, what are we doing?
You mentioned when we saw the film, you mentioned a comparison between this and Fury, but it was a very specific one. I think you mentioned the domestic scene.
Yes, they both had scenes in which the soldiers were sitting down with the locals at a dining room table.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe this. It was happening again in Iraq. And but it did happen. The soldiers did make friends with some of these people, as my son stated.
Yeah.
But you had to be very careful. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
They use that domestic scene.
Yeah.
They bring the tension down a little bit, and then they push it back up again.
And they personalize it. There's nothing like sitting around dinner and with people who are acting like your friends and whom you, if you're smart at all, you're going to be suspicious.
Yes.
And a little bit different with Fury, but both of them very nicely have bring down that outward action into the interior and really establish even more tension by that than driving around in tanks or shooting from rooftops. Right. Oh, Linda, we have to decide now on grade. Everybody's waiting, and this time you're going first.
I'm going
Linda Baas, the film is American Sniper. The real star, all notwithstanding Bradley Cooper, Linda, the real star is Clint Eastwood.
Who's 84.
Oh, and just as sharp as can be.
Yeah. It's not a typical movie that's released during the holidays, that's for sure. But I think people will learn something from this movie. I give it a B.
Great. And you and I and this one are simpatico. Give it a B. So if you're looking for something that's going to shake you up a little bit and remind you of how careful we have to be when we engage ourselves across the sea, the film is American Sniper, and the director